by a lot, so that'd be cool. But we'll give them just a minute for everybody to show up. Doesn't dump everybody out at the same time. How you doing, Natalie? Hey, Chris.
Hey Etienne, how are you?
Doing okay.
Hello.
Excited.
Same.
It's the top of the hour, so it looks like the numbers are filling up. We'll give them a few minutes. Those of you who are joining us, love to see where you guys are coming in from. I'm coming in from outside Nashville. Feel free to put it in the chat. I'll put it there so it pops up. I say Nashville, I'm outside Nashville. Cincinnati, Ohio. Cool, Chris.
That's
Awesome.
me. It's gray here.
I haven't been outside yet today. I think it might be gray here too. Looks like the UK. All right. Great, Anya. Montreal, Canada. So a couple people from overseas, Columbus, Ohio, more Ohioans. Cool. All right. Great to see everybody who's coming in. We'll talk a little bit more about the chat and the Q&A in a minute here, but feel free to continue um, to put where you're from, because I love seeing, I just kind of live vicariously through you guys when I see these, Germany and France. But it's 8:01, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Key Elements to Outsourcing Clinical Activities in 2024. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm a medical device guru here at Greenlight Guru. I'll be the moderator for today's event. Today's session, we plan to run for about 50 to 60 minutes in total, and we want to hear from you. So on the right side of your screen, you've already found the chat, which is fantastic, but you also see a few other tabs. So there's the chat and then there's the Q&A. Chat is where you can answer questions that we ask you, but also ask questions to each other and engage with one another and post general comments. We love to see the emojis and the hands up in the air and the clapping. That's really great to see. But the Q&A portion is where you can ask questions that you definitely want our presenter to answer during the Q&A portion at the end of today's webinar. We may not be able to keep up with questions that come up in the chat, but if you ask them in the Q&A, we'll try to get those answered. If we don't get those answered, we'll provide those to Chris after the webinar so that maybe we can have some follow-up. We'll see how that goes, but definitely use the Q&A. Lastly, we always get the question about the full recording and the slides. So we will share those with all the registrants after the webinar, so keep an eye out for that. That should be in an email from us later. I'd like to share a few words about Greenlight Guru, why we put on these training sessions. Improving the quality of life for our customers and their patients is our mission at Greenlight Guru. It's likely a similar mission of many of you joining us today. We're constantly looking for ways to fulfill that mission, whether that's through hosting these free webinar sessions, partnering with world-class medical device experts, or through our award-winning cloud-based solutions. At Greenlight Guru, our focus is on moving MedTech forward. That means helping you get your life-changing medical devices to market and keeping them over time. We know the challenges that medical device companies face in this heavily regulated industry, and our solutions are designed to help you streamline your processes so you can navigate those regulatory hurdles and succeed in the market. The Greenlight Guru MedTech Suite provides quality management, product development, and clinical data management solutions, along with high quality training and education designed exclusively for medical devices. So, if you're interested in seeing why 1,100 of the world's leading medtech companies trust Greenlight Guru, head over to www.greenlight.guru after today's session so you can see a personalized demo. Today's webinar is focused on outsourcing clinical activities. And at Greenlight Guru, we built the leading toolbox for MedTech clinical data collection. Specifically designed for MedTech operations, Greenlight Guru Clinical is a single compliant platform for collection and management of all clinical evidence, safety, and performance data. So if you're interested in learning more about this system, you can schedule a demo with us. Okay, let's turn our attention to today's presenters. Chris Rush, Solutions Engineer, and Natalie Logeman, Senior Manager of Partners at Greenlight Guru. Natalie's a partnership and business development professional based in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the US. Prior to Greenlight, Natalie worked at a variety of software startups during developing marketing and partnership strategies to drive business success. At Greenlight, Natalie manages the partner team, focuses on building best-in-class partnerships with leading medical device consultancies, technologies, and contract research organizations, CROs. She's really fun to work with as well, so if you ever get a chance to do that, definitely recommend. Our other presenter, Chris, is a biomedical engineer based in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the US, and has spent about 12 years in the medical device space before joining Greenlight Group. He spent a number of those years managing clinical studies for mostly class 3 implantable devices on pivotal and pre market approval or PMA studies here in the US and around the world. Chris now helps medical device companies of all shapes and sizes assess data capture tools for upcoming clinical studies. And I guess I shouldn't have said Natalie's fun to work with because Chris is too. And now I just sound like a broken record, but they're both fantastic people. And so let's get on to the part that you are here for today's webinar and the featured content. So take it away, Chris, Natalie.
Thank you, Etienne. Appreciate the introduction. So as Etienne mentioned, I'm a solutions engineer here with Greenlight Guru on the clinical side. So I focus on helping uh, customers that are assessing clinical tools, specifically electronic data capture tools. That is one of the tools that we offer here at Greenlight Guru. So I'm talking to prospective customers every day that are facing the challenges of planning for their clinical studies, allocating resources for their clinical studies, and also considering vendors or those partners that they're outsourcing activities to. Us being the EDC, we are one of those partners that uh, people just like yourselves are talking to figure out who to use for their software solutions, for instance, similar to assessing CROs for a lot of the other clinical activities. So today I will be sharing some key trends. We've got a state of the MedTech industry benchmark report that we will be releasing at the end of this month here, this month being February, so I guess next month. Towards the end of February, we'll be releasing this report. This is the 5th year that we've done the State of the MedTech Industry Report. And this report really explores valuable insights, drawing from over 500 industry leaders to really unveil evolving trends in MedTech, strategic shifts, and key challenges that are really shaping the future of our industry, MedTech, med device landscape overall. So let's hop right into it. I'm going to be sharing some key trends from that report. We will be sharing a lot more information from this report, and you'll be able to get access to that report towards the end of February. Um, but let's take a look at some of the key findings from that. So firstly, in this report, we asked things like, what are your top business objectives? So we're asking teams, much like yourselves, industry leaders, industry teams, and really unsurprisingly, getting market approval for a new product, 35%. It's a big priority for teams, as well as ensuring compliance to regulatory bodies, almost the same percentage. So new products being compliant, obviously very important. But interestingly to us here on the clinical side, 27% of survey respondents said that clinical investigations, trials, evaluations are a priority, as well as 21% saying that post-market clinical activities are a priority. Survey respondents here really represent every device class known to regulators. So this is class 1 through 3, and we can really see that clinical activities are a huge priority for manufacturers. This really puts added pressure on clinical sites, which really are seeking efficiencies in trial execution more than ever now. Um, as we all know, during the COVID pandemic, there was a huge amount of pressure on manufacturers and our clinical sites to figure out ways to run studies in remote virtual manners. And that really led to systems and practices that brought new efficiencies to the way studies are run. And these efficiencies that were required during that time are really now the new norm that we've all inherited from COVID. Uh, as clinical activities continue to be a priority, as we're seeing here on this slide, it's really important to be efficient in the execution of clinical activities, which really starts with efficient planning, efficient delegation of duties. Secondly, we found that, as we see here, the plurality of respondents when asked who is planning new clinical activities in 2024, the plurality of respondents indicated they are planning new clinical activities. As we talk to teams day in, day out, assessing what we provide here at Greenlight Guru, but also what prospects, what sponsors are looking for from other vendors, they're telling us that really clinical teams are expected to do more with less resources. And when I say that, I'm referring to doing more with less people on our clinical teams, as well as doing more with less funding of our clinical projects. So those requirements to really optimize the output of our internal teams add to this pressure what we refer to kind of as the final push towards MDR compliance. And add this all up, there are many factors demanding the attention of our teams, who are also tasked with new product development, with new clinical activities, future facing, as well as complying with the EU MDR, and gathering clinical evidence to support those new technologies. And as we all know, financial pressures, funding getting harder and harder to come by. So doing more with less funding, as well as doing more with less personnel, dedicated resources internally on our teams. And then lastly, we asked about the conduct of clinical activities in that MedTech industry report. And here's what we find. So we're seeing teams are about a quarter of teams are planning on handling a lot of the clinical activities in-house, so a dedicated internal clinical team. And then similarly, about the same amount say that they plan to outsource to CROs, or contract research organizations, or consultants for clinical activities. And then about half of teams say that they're planning on using a combination of both in-house team as well as consultants uh, partners. So if we assume that this breakdown here is reflective of all of our attendees here today, then many of you, it's safe to assume, are probably planning to outsource some of the duties for your study, as many of the teams that we surveyed here indicated. And this is really reflective of teams that I'm talking to day in, day out as well. So it's hard to do it alone. Some try to, and then many choose to outsource and get help from partners. So when it comes to planning for the clinical journey, so there's what we have here. This is based on our experience, kind of breaking the stages of the clinical roadmap down into these 7 stages. So starting with innovation, so that's really early on, device ideation, prototyping. Stage 2, more of the strategy. So you're really starting to think about clinical strategy, starting to kind of conceptually draw together what your clinical study might look like. You might start the fact finding of what is required for submission, pre-submission, et cetera. And then stage 3, that's where we come in, typically talking with customers like yourselves. This is also where CRO engagement probably starts to happen, maybe even stage 2. And here we get into clinical investigation, study execution. So we're looking at site selection, the actual study build. So I'm referring to the EDC, electronic data capture, study build, and then many of the activities that contract research organizations help take on. Here in stage 3, patient recruitment, the actual data collection, data management. Stage 2, CROs often are helping with protocol developments, some of the strategic efforts that are made in preparation for the study. And then steps 4 through 7, that's kind of towards the end of the studies, and that's regulatory submissions, product launch, and then back into the clinical world. Post-market surveillance. Again, this is where we come in and help teams understand how do we capture data on our marketed devices to ensure that the devices are performing as expected, safety profile is satisfactory, and reporting that to regulatory authorities as well. So when it comes to outsourcing some of these activities, we'd like to think about, from our perspective, talking to teams that are doing this all the time. The way that we kind of think about this, I've laid out here. We hear that there are certain duties when it comes to outsourcing, duties or responsibilities that you as a sponsor really want to keep an extra eye on, as we say here. This is pretty subjective. This is not necessarily a comprehensive list. You could certainly argue that some of the elements from the left side here on this slide belong on the right side. But regardless, what we see as kind of more standardized duties to outsource are things in this traditional aspects to outsource. Things like protocol writing, CRF drafting, site contracting, site monitoring, and then high level overall project management. Very common to outsource those. And what we see as kind of the keep an extra eye on are really elements that we've seen sponsor engagement at a higher level, more hands-on engagement, pays dividends to those sponsors that actually take part in these activities. So things like defining your primary and secondary endpoints. So you as the sponsor are going to know best the device history, the performance of your device in preclinical testing, the performance of predicate devices, study design of publications examining those predicate devices as well. You as the sponsor are really going to have a deep understanding of that already, and you don't want to leave yourself on the sideline when it comes to the planning of these key elements of the study, primary, secondary endpoints. Defining how much overall data is needed as well. So really sponsors understanding of the clinical workflow in which the device is used, uh, understanding what's realistic in terms of data collection. You as the sponsor are going to have a very intimate understanding of that. And again, bringing that expertise to the table, keeping that as a key contributor to planning for the scope of data collection is really going to be important as well. And then in terms of the informed consent, data processing consent, so really understanding the scope of what the data you're going to be collecting needs to be for today, but also what that scope of the use of that data is going to be long term. So what your long term strategy of that data use is going to be, and properly planning for consenting for the use of that data in the manner that you're planning on using it. Maybe it's for future marketing types of applications. You need to make sure that you're consenting for those with those long term plans in mind. And those are things that a CRO, someone that you're outsourcing to, they're going to want your input. They're going to need your input. And if that's kind of fully outsourced, it might be missed, and might be kicking yourself later for it. Also, in terms of submissions to ethics committees, IRB, institutional review boards, um, oftentimes that comes with questions, a back and forth with the EC, a back and forth with the institutional review board. They might be asking for additional test results from preclinical testing. You as the sponsor are really going to best understand that device design history and be able to defend and provide answers to those questions that are pretty much unavoidable when it comes to EC submissions and EC approval processes. And then lastly, patient recruitment biostatistics. We find the sponsors that we work with, they always have a deep understanding of the patient population that they're serving. When it comes to patient recruitment, that understanding of the patient population is really irreplaceable. So the influence of the sponsor can be really valuable for patient recruitment in conjunction with your partner, whether that's a CRO or a site that's recruiting patients. Bringing your expertise to that patient recruitment effort can really, again, make that a success. So when it comes to, let's take a look at our next slide here. As you're beginning to select and work with partners to outsource your clinical operations, um, what we see is that as you're beginning to define your requirements for those partners, those vendors, kind of thinking about this from a software development, product development approach, using what we call the SMART approach, and that uh, is an acronym. It stands for specific. So your goals, defining your goals through the SMART approach, your goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, as well as time bound. So beginning to compile your requirements for your study, your requirements for the partner that you're looking to engage with, defining those through this kind of product development approach can really best distill your needs and present those to your prospective partners, so that you're making sure that they are appropriately understanding what you need, what you don't need, what's a priority, and making sure that they're quoting you the work that you need and nothing more, nothing less. Secondly, kind of mapping out which study responsibilities and duties, requirements can be handled in-house versus externally. So taking a look at your internal clinical team. Some clinical teams that we speak with, it's a very lean, small clinical team, maybe highly experienced, uh, and only a certain amount of bandwidth on those small teams. We also speak with large teams, and they're able to take on the majority of the clinical activities in-house. But really assessing the bandwidth of the team, the planned growth of that team. Are we bringing on additional clinical staff internally to prepare for this clinical study? Do we have the funds to do so? So really starting to take a hard look at the internal resources available before looking at external vendors that will take on responsibilities that you simply can't handle. Um, and then really importantly, steps 3 and 4 here, uh, really important to really track the progress, the measurable metrics that map back to your requirements as you begin to engage with partners. And that really starts with day one during the assessment. And we'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later in this presentation. But continually assessing uh, those metrics, documenting those metrics, and using that for future learning, understanding uh, the partner performance for future studies, as well as course correcting during the course of the study itself, really being able to uh, have very defined measurable metrics of those requirements. And next slide here. So having worked with a lot of different sponsors that are seeking partnerships with us here at Greenlight Guru, but also speaking with them about their engagement with other partners, CRO partners, for instance, we've compiled a list of what we think are really key considerations to take into account when assessing any partner. So once you've kind of pulled in all of those requirements from that previous slide using that SMART um, strategy, understanding, okay, what do we need to do when we're starting to engage uh, with partners? And again, this is not by any means a comprehensive list, but these are some of the considerations that we've seen being really key. Some of these are more subjective than others, but let's start here at the top with individual preferences. So this consideration definitely the most subjective of them all, I would say, but it really should not be undervalued. Uh, we see working with partners that culture fit, the culture fit with the sponsor and the partner that they're looking to engage with. That culture fit is really apparent early on. Oftentimes it's a gut feeling. It should not be ignored. So things to consider. Doing business with sponsor to CRO, it really is working people to people. It's not business to business per se. It really is comes down to the people that are involved with that interaction. Um, so understanding things like, what are your peers telling you? Can you gather a list of referral partners from maybe other sponsor teams that you have worked with before or you're familiar with? They can recommend partners to you. Um, you know, in terms of the subjective types of measures of these partners that you're working with, are they displaying a high attention to detail, or are they more fast and loose? Does that fit your culture? Does that fit your needs? Are you a high attention to detail? So somebody who's a little bit more scrappy from a partner side, maybe that's appropriate. Um, are they more of a hustler, or are they more buttoned up and polished, measured? And really importantly, professionalism. When they show up to meetings, are they prepared? If they're bringing whatever they're bringing to these initial engagement meetings, that's probably going to be consistently what they bring throughout the entire duration of that engagement. How transparent do they seem during these initial meetings with them? When you ask them questions, does it seem like they're hiding the ball, or are they being very transparent? It's usually a gut feeling, and again, you just can't really ignore that gut feeling. And then language capabilities, kind of that objective measure, really important. Do they have the language capabilities interacting between sponsor to partner, but also with their engagement with clinical sites in whatever geographies they'll be working within. So kind of being able to bridge that language gap, a really objective measure, but also really important. Secondly, we look at access to sites. So are there specific sites that would be of strategic importance to your study? And there's a number of factors that can really contribute to sites being of strategic importance. So perhaps you're targeting key opinion leaders in the particular segment of the clinical space, and those key opinion leaders may be part of a broader sales and marketing strategy. Certain investigators that I've worked with in the past can really offer clinical prestige to your study. They can be great candidates for podium presentations, having lots of influence within the clinical community. Very important consideration to take there. Also, in my experience, sometimes those podium key opinion leaders, maybe they're not the strongest enrollment participants, which is okay. Again, if you're looking for that KOL, that key opinion leader to be a podium speaker, maybe you are okay with lower enrollment at that site, but you of course need to understand that will have sites that are kind of more your workhorse sites. Sometimes those busy workhorse high enrollment sites, sometimes they don't care to be on a podium. So really understanding the dynamics at your sites is important to understand as you're figuring out how many sites do we need to add and why. Experience at sites with competitors' products. It's always helpful if the site that you're utilizing has experience in clinical studies in the device class that you're considering them for specifically. That means their research team is probably experienced. They understand how engagement with companies of your particular segment work, and that makes it a lot more seamless. Clinical workflow. So this can really vary by geography. I'm here in the US. Clinical practices here in the US can be quite different than in Europe or in Colombia, South America. Understanding the clinical workflow at your site, the sites that you're assessing, and does that align with the requirements of your protocol? And then lastly, that gets back to in which country are you looking to commercialize? So again, that's going to be really important understanding uh, the clinical workflows and all these dynamics within the countries that you're working within. Partner experience, of course, massively important. When you're referred partners, this is a lot of probably the reason they're being referred is the experience they have had with a sponsor that maybe you are familiar with or worked at before. But really assessing, does the partner have experience within kind of your clinical world, and why is that important? Reasons for that. So impact on the partner's ability to provide actionable inputs for study design. So when we're assessing partners, whether that's a contract research organization or any other partner that you're assessing to outsource clinical activities, that partner's experience with your device type can really inform your study design better. Maybe there's things that you haven't thought about as you're developing your protocol, and the partner that you're looking to assess or you're looking to work with has extensive experience in that particular area. And that gets back to more impact on certain therapeutic areas. So rare diseases, uh, devices treating rare diseases, often that's really important is a CRO or a partner that has worked in that specific use case, that specific rare disease space. Um, and when I say this should be documented in terms of references, there's other ways you can document experience. So you can have them take a look at your protocol and have them give feedback on that protocol, and you'll be able to get a pretty quick understanding of their familiarity with the space that you're working within, that sort of thing. But also written references, that sort of thing can be very handy. And we get asked at Greenlight Guru, we get asked for customer references all the time. We're working with a prospective sponsor that's thinking about using us. Perfectly normal for them to ask for a reference from us, and we're happy to provide that. Any uh, any partner you're looking to engage with should be very comfortable doing that as well. So cost and structures of working with partners. So this is an interesting slide. So uh, we like to say cost is never what was originally quoted. In reality, the cost that's seen on on the total line of your vendor quote, it's not really the reality usually, and cost of studies really not as static as we'd like to believe they would be. Costs for clinical studies are infamous for coming in over budget. It's usually the case. Timelines are usually longer than expected. So having a really good understanding of the costs associated with your study, we'll get to the timelines a little bit later, really important here. It's really important to understand how the project cost is structured. Is it by patients? Is it by hour of that partner's time dedicated to the study? It's really important to kind of kick the tires and understand all the what ifs. So, what if scenario X, Y, or Z? How does that impact the structure? That can be a really good way of avoiding a budget explosion, planning for kind of the worst case scenario, and then this last bullet point, uh, understanding the total price with kind of the worst case scenario total price, and then understanding the potential savings with best case scenario performance of your study. That can give you a lot more realistic understanding of the budget, and then you can kind of scale that back to best case scenario with certain uh, aspects of the study, maybe running faster or high performing sites, that sort of thing. So access to data. So this is where we kind of come in directly. Greenlight Guru, this is where we live, is electronic data capture. So when working with partners, whether that's an EDC like ourselves or working with a CRO that maybe is handling data management for your teams, access to data is really an important consideration here. The value of data is increasing drastically. I never thought I would use an AI tool. Uh, I if I am, everyone is. With developments in AI, the value of our data is really greater than ever. Um, and access to raw data is more important than ever. So sometimes you'll be talking with a partner and they'll mention you will have access to the data. Well, what does that look like? Does that mean you as the sponsor will have access to the system yourself? Or does that mean that you'll have access to a data manager? That can be quite different. It's a distinction to make. System access is going to put the control of the data, the control of the system in the manufacturer's hands, whereas promises of data access can often mean the data manager will probably be on your speed dial because you'll have to go through them to actually access your data. And then working with a partner, can you bring your own EDC system or will you have to use the EDC system that's prescribed by the partner? Again, just important to understand that not only for access to your current study, but then long term uh, access to your data, continuity of your data over time. Will you be using system A today with partner A? And then maybe a couple years from now, future studies, you'll be using partner B, and that might mean system B. Uh, Being able to bring your own EDC can often mean you have continuity. You have the same EDC platform over time with your studies, same system. You have familiarity, and you have direct access with that EDC system. So important things to consider. And then asking the partner as you're assessing, you know, how often will you actually have access to the data, and then what does that look like? Ask the question. If I need an interim report, 3 weeks notice or 1 week notice, what does that look like? Talk me through that. Next, let's talk about patient engagement. So, um, engaging with a partner, oftentimes they are able to help with patient engagement. And that's oftentimes a huge factor in engaging with a partner in the first place. Um, Having a partner that is familiar with your patient population and understanding what drives participation in that patient population can be hugely important for successful patient recruitment. Um, if your study is using patient reported outcomes, for instance, you want to ask that partner, do they have a documented track record or an approach to actually meeting recruitment goals, meeting data entry compliance with those patient reported outcomes? And really dig into that. What can that partner show? What can they share? What referrals can they share that can kind of document and prove that? Again, getting back to that software development, verify, validating the results to get back to your requirements. And then we get back to study timelines here. So uh, can the partner that you're engaging with, whether that's a software partner such as Greenlight Guru, or whether it's a contract research organization, can they actually meet your study timelines? Really important. So understanding the estimated setup time for once you decide to engage with a partner, how long does it take to get started? Sometimes that's a short time, sometimes that's a long time. Um, Clinical studies, as we're all familiar, are chronically delayed. So what can that partner do to mitigate that risk of study delay? What is their experience with study delays? How do they go about avoiding that, and kind of digging into their experiences will give you a lot of clarity as to um, how effective they can be on impacting study timelines. And then really importantly, uh, we as a software provider, we get the question quite often of the capacity. So tell me about your team size. Tell me about your onboarding team. Tell me about your ongoing support team. Will you be engaged with a dedicated resource at the partner uh, company? Will it be a flexible support resource at the company? So dedicated versus flexible resources. And then again, how can you kind of prove this? How can they provide any sort of documentation? Do they have any internal SOPs, work instructions for engagement with their customers that really demonstrates, yes, they've done this before, they've gotten this exact question before, and they know what they're doing, so they can provide some sort of maybe it's even an infographic on your onboarding timeline showing that we have documented how this works, we know how this works, and here's exactly what to expect. So at this point, I'm going to pass the presentation over to my colleague, Natalie. And Natalie, I'll hand it over and let you take it away here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chris. Just a reminder, feel free to throw more questions in the chat as we will have time to review a few questions at the end of this webinar. So as mentioned previously, my name is Natalie Logeman, and I manage our partner program here at Greenlight, which also includes working directly with consultants and contract research organizations to assist with companies like you all with clinical services. So today I want to highlight just a high-level overview of how we work with CROs and best practices that you can leverage when engaging with a CRO. So first, we've been talking about CROs quite a lot, but what exactly is a CRO? Well, they're an organization contracted by a med device company, also the sponsor, to take lead in clinical trials. And one thing that I wanted to highlight is using a CRO is super common. Nearly 3 out of 4, so 75% of clinical trials are conducted by a CRO on behalf of a company, which if you're here for the first time or heard in the first part of the presentation, this might not be a surprise due to the complexity of the trials and, quite frankly, cost of doing a clinical trial internally. So with that in mind, clinical trials definitely are a huge part of the customer journey, but they also start from the very beginning all the way to the end of your life cycle as a med device company. So even more so with changing regulations with post-market feedback, there's definitely an area in which clinical needs to be a part of every single stage of your journey. So whether you're still working in the prototype or you're post-market with tens or hundreds of products on the market, you need to be thinking about how clinical is impacting your strategy and what you are doing to stay on top of regulations. So whether or not you use internal resources or you're looking online, there's definitely an area where you want to look in terms of what CRO services can be provided. A full CRO service, a CRO can usually provide all of the information that is below here, but there are also a lot of CROs that are more boutique where they can really specialize in different areas. So for example, some CROs really focus on preclinical work, some really just focus on first-in-human studies. Other CROs might focus on medical writing and really assisting in the data process rather than a full scope of a clinical trial. So again, with this in mind, it's really good to take a note of what potential work you need. And also if you want someone that can do the end-to-end, so thinking about a general contractor and building a house, or going through this process right now, do you want to hire a general contractor to manage the whole thing? Or do you want to work with an individual consultant to just spot check and focus on different areas of clinical work? This isn't a complete exhaustive list, but it's a great place to start and be thinking about who and where you want assistance. With taking these services in mind as well, the process is pretty similar to working with any outsourced provider or also working with any other type of consultant. So first, you gotta identify the need and create the scope of services, hopefully leveraging a lot of the areas where Chris has highlighted earlier in this presentation. In addition, this could also be focusing on areas that you are considering outsourcing. So you might still be in the process of determining whether or not you are going to do something in-house or outsource it. It's always good to continue to take a look at what these options entail. After you identify the need, it's pretty simple. It's time to research. There are a lot of CROs out there in the med device space. Do you want one that can really just focus on med device? Do you want a CRO that is focused on med device but also can do pharma, biologics? It's really up to you. And there are several resources available to provide a list of what different resources, what different CROs do. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a plug to our recently published top 40 plus CRO list on our website, where we've done a lot of research internally of identifying who are the best CROs in this space based on their reputation, based on the services they provide, and based on, quite frankly, the feedback we have gotten from our customers and prospects as well. So take a look if you need some assistance as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about how our partner network can help. After you identify a shortlist, it's time to reach out and submit for more information from these CROs. So a lot of these CROs may have a form on their website where you can put your information, including the information about your trial. Other CROs I know that I work with actually just have a simple form to meet with them live for the first time to have that initial conversation even prior to giving them a lot of information about your particular need. So again, time to submit that RFP, whether that's meeting with a CRO to discuss what an RFP might look like, or actually providing it upfront for the particular CRO. From there, and we'll talk about on the next slide, what information you should provide when you come to the CRO. It's time to meet with them and hone in on what exactly you need and really discuss what Chris mentioned earlier. Understanding, is there a culture fit? Can they provide the services that you're looking for? Beyond even just looking at study timelines as well as cost, which are, of course, a huge area to focus as well. Unique to the CRO and clinical services, depending on the project size, it's not uncommon to host a bid defense of several CROs to provide a CRO the opportunity to fully present their proposal to you and a greater team. I would like to mention that this does take a lot of time, so be wise in terms of whether or not this is required by your internal team or if this is an unnecessary step based on your scope of projects and what this might entail. But again, not uncommon. CROs are used to doing this, so if this is something that your team really wants, definitely an area that you can take a look in. Finally, after negotiating, taking a look, so as Chris mentioned as well, the sticker price isn't always the exact price, right? So really honing in on what exactly you want the CRO to do versus what you want to do internally will really assist in figuring out the realistic timeline as well as the realistic cost of what the study could look like. So simple process, it's identifying the need, starting the conversation, negotiating, and then beginning the project. But how can you make the most of this process? Because let's be frank, you all have day jobs, so figuring out different consultants and service providers takes a lot of time. So one thing that I was working with CROs the past few weeks has been, how can our customers, how can our prospects come to these meetings with CROs prepared and make it best for the CROs as well? Because one thing, while you're interviewing the CRO, they're also interviewing you as a company to make sure that they can provide the services that you need, as well as showcasing that there's efficacy and validity to your product. So while you are interviewing them, they're also interviewing you and making sure that it's a good fit or a good match for their organization. So I highlighted 3 different areas of which type of information you need to come. Of course, there's the best column, but at the very least, what you need to come to the table with is a proposed timeline of your study. Again, I emphasize proposed, as we all know, study timelines may or may not be realistic of what we want. Everyone wants to be on market yesterday, for example, but a timeline that you think is realistic for your team as well as a potential CRO. And the description of your device and proposed indications. I also say proposed indications as I recognize these things can change. And a lot of our CROs have a regulatory arm as well. So you might, of course, potentially look at adjusting this over time. This also includes future indications as well. So making sure to highlight what indications you want now, what you might go for in the future. So that way you can really leverage the clinical trials that you're doing now for future too. If you have more information is the better. So come to the table with what I just mentioned, as well as a description of the study and synopsis of the proposed protocol, as well as what patients you want to include and what are some inclusion and exclusion criteria. So again, this helps hone in for the CRO whether or not they can support the study and if they are able to have access to the patients that you are looking to target with your particular study. And of course, if you have the best information that you can provide a CRO is all of the documentation surrounding your plan for your clinical work, including a drafted protocol if you have one. If you have an in-house clinical team of what this protocol could look like, again, it's drafted. The CRO will assist in honing in on what needs to be changed and editing it accordingly. But this really helps the CRO really quickly define whether or not they'll be able to assist and what gaps they see. In addition, it's super helpful to highlight a scope of work and include listing out what you're planning to do in-house. So similarly, if you're remodeling a basement like I just did at a home, if you're looking to completely remodel and you leave out drywall or you leave out flooring, the CRO is going to be asking you about that. So come to the table highlighting what levels of work that you are going to be doing to showcase that you actually have thought through this and you know exactly what you are planning to do and what you want the CRO to do as well. So again, use this as a good framework. The more information you can provide, the better, especially ahead of time. CROs also love to review information ahead to the meeting. It's also a great way to identify if they're a great CRO or not. If they haven't read the information that you provided ahead of their meeting, it's probably a negative sign in terms of how they will be working with you for the rest of your project. And as promised, I wanted to come back to our partner network as how you can also have further assistance in identifying a CRO for your project. As part of our partner ecosystem, we've been working really hard to identify and working with the top CROs in the industry to not only support our 1,100 customers, but also the larger industry through different marketing initiatives, through webinars, through content. And so definitely happy to provide introductions as needed. And naturally, as managing the partner team, I have to get a plug. If you are a CRO listening to this webinar, I would love to connect to see if there's a fit in our partner ecosystem for you. So you can go directly to greenlight.guru/partners-CRO to learn more and apply. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or email, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you. So who's in our partner ecosystem? I've highlighted just a few on this slide, spanning geographies, service types, and other areas, whether that's first-in-human studies or PMCF or full-scope CRO, including quality and regulatory. We have highlighted a lot of different areas and different CROs that consist across the globe, not just here in the US where I'm based. Again, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to provide introductions as well as provide recommendations to any of these organizations listed, or perhaps someone that I might not have heard of. I'm happy to provide our framework for scoping out a CRO and whether or not they should be included in our network and how we actually identify whether or not to provide recommendations. So with that, thanks for having me, and I hope to hear from you soon. I'll turn it back over to the team as I am seeing my Q&A and chat blow up a little bit for some questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Chris, for your presentation. It was really fantastic. So we do have some questions. One, you may have answered it during your section, Natalie, but let's ask this question from, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pronounce this correctly, but And Nirud, I need a lesson on this because I want to know how to ask this. Do you have a list of CROs in India?
We do have a couple CROs that we have worked with in India. One thing to think about as well, do you want a CRO that is located and headquartered in India, or do you want a CRO that is able to do clinical services in India? That is something that to really identify. So I'm happy to provide that list afterwards and a couple of recommendations, as I don't believe in our top 40 CRO list we have any that are headquartered in India.
Cool. Yeah, it looked like several had upvoted that one, so maybe that would be good to get out. Richard asked, how do you check if a CRO meets the regulatory requirements for a project or study?
Yeah, so firstly, you want to review their SOPs. That's hugely important, making sure that they do have all of their processes documented, work instructions, and reviewing that with the requirements for GCP, for instance, in mind, and then even asking for audit reports. Maybe they are willing to share them. Maybe they'll be redacted, but seeking documentation of compliance to the extent you can is gonna pay off in the long run.
Okay, very cool. And it looks like you saw the question about Canada as well. So maybe just a regional. We probably have something like that. So I don't know if
it's a great
share that
piece of
later.
marketing content. We have that list, but I think it sounds like, which I'm actually meeting with marketing later, putting together a heat map of CROs.
Okay, cool. Oscar asked, do CROs identify potential conflicts of interest in a study, or is that something you need to actively request from them?
Yeah. So in terms of conflict of interest, that could be, I'm guessing there's probably one or the other. You're referring to CRO conflict of interest, working with you as a sponsor and maybe working with a competitive sponsor. If that's what you're referring to, you can certainly ask for their SOP, or if they have some sort of ethics manual laying out their particular, I guess, process for conflict of interest, disclosing that, how they deal with that. If that's something that they are willing to share, and then just asking them, of course, is probably the first step. But looking at their documented stance and how they actually deal with conflicts of interest, because many CROs are going to have engagement with competitive sponsors. Maybe it's different product segments, and that's okay. But really digging into their internal processes, you'll get a good idea of the transparency they're sharing, hopefully, and that should help answer that question, I think.
Okay, great. An additional question from Oscar was, with Greenlight Grew CRO partner programs, is there financial benefits for using these particular CROs?
Yeah, great question. Typically, no. In terms of what the CRO is offering, I'm assuming you're asking as a sponsor looking to see if you can get a discount from a CRO. I would say typically no. However, we do work with the CROs. We've vetted them. So they do know our customers well, and will definitely take care of Greenlight Guru customers.
Okay.
Etienne, I wanted to finish my thought. I kind of mentioned two things: CRO conflict of interest, site conflict of interest. That's another thing. Investigator conflict of interest, working with multiple companies that are competitors. They should disclose that. That's part of the site assessment, is understanding conflict of interest at sites. They need to disclose that, and that should be part of the site assessment SOPs. Whichever partner CRO you're working with, they should have their site assessment process laid out and documented for you to review. So.
Okay. Apologies if I cut you off.
No,
I
totally forgot my second point.
I'm trying to read and listen at the same time, and it does not work well. So, okay. Annie asked, thank you for the I clearly mispronounced the name, but Annie asked, do you help consult or evaluate CROs on behalf of medical device companies?
Yes. So part of our vetting process when we work with our partner network, and I'm assuming this is how you want to take the question, is we really dive into what services they provide, their impact in the industry, and how customers view their services. So we definitely do so. If we have our customer success team is also really good in connecting with myself and the team to understand if we have a good relationship with them. And by good relationship, I mean simply a lot of times of what our customers have seen from that particular CRO. So yes, definitely comes into play.
Okay. And Juliet asked a question about CROs that maybe add a little bit more than just the clinical investigation. Are there CROs that provide support for regulatory activities during the planning phase of a study?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there are I would say almost the majority of CROs will have at least some in-house regulatory expertise because of this exact reason. The scope of services that they provide the sponsor varies, but it's very, very common for them, a CRO, to also have a regulatory arm to sit into some of these meetings and provide that extra support. So absolutely is the short answer.
Very cool. I can see that being especially helpful with indications for use, and that is a big part of what you're actually planning there. Okay, let me mark that question as answered. And again, if we don't get to all of these questions, we will forward this on to Natalie and Chris, and we'll do our best to follow up with you. Toddy asked a little bit more about the risks, Chris. So could you please provide an example of how to mitigate the risk of delays in the timelines of a research study? And we talked a little bit about making sure there's no conflict of interest, but what about mitigating some of the other risks?
Yeah, so this is kind of addressing the unknown or planning for the unknown. But CROs that have been around the block, they have dealt with the unknown for a long time. So often those are known factors. So when I was referring to mitigating risk of delay, some of the things I was thinking about were CRO partners having experience working with specific ethics committees, specific IRBs at sites that maybe you're looking to utilize. Their understanding of the nuances between those IRBs, those ECs can greatly simplify like the timeline for that approval process. If the CRO is a known entity to the IRB is known to the CRO. Oftentimes they understand working with each other, so that can mitigate the risk of delay. Where working with a partner that maybe doesn't know those particular bodies could potentially introduce delay. Site assessment process. I think that can mitigate delays as well. Again, understanding the bandwidth of the clinical site, doing a comprehensive site assessment, seeing their processes for that, really dig into that. How do they quantify clinical bandwidth? How do they quantify how many investigators are needed at each site so that we can adequately recruit and adequately meet your enrollment goals? So those are some of the things that I think about when mitigating risk.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Especially your example of they've been around the block a couple of times. Anytime you work with a professional, we always tend to think that my situation's unique, and then it turns out that no, actually they've experienced this a whole lot, so they really know how
Yeah,
to
and if
handle
you've got experiences that you share with them, and maybe they haven't heard that type of situation, how would they think about that particular challenge? So kind of bring it all to the table.
Yeah. Larissa asks, do CROs provide safety oversight, medical review of safety data, risk management for the trial and product under evaluation?
So I'll answer this, but from my experience, typically we had data safety monitoring boards, clinical events committees. Those were typically independent bodies. They were not directly employed by the CRO, but those are independent review. And CROs typically work with kind of a known DSMB or a known clinical events committee, but they are independent. So hopefully that answers that question.
All right. Fantastic. Let's make this, well, it depends on how it goes. We might make this the last question because I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but Annie asked another question. Since I destroyed her name, I feel like I want to ask hers again. How important is that CROs understand and validate PROM surveys, especially if they're created in English but need to be translated into regional languages?
So I'll try and take this one as well. So understanding and validating PROM, I'm assuming that's some variation of patient-reported outcome measure surveys, maybe, especially if they're created in English but need to be translated. So CROs should definitely you should definitely ask what their process for translation is. They should probably have a known vendor that they use for validated translation that will do that for them. Ask for what kind of documentation can you provide from that validated translation service, their SOPs, that sort of thing. They should be able to provide something as to how they handle translation. Usually they'll use a third party to do that for you, but definitely dig into their familiarity. It is very important to understand the partner you're engaging with. Have they engaged across language barriers before, and how do they handle that? How has it worked in the past? Do they have any references?
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to issue one more apology because I don't know whether you're male or female. So I apologize if I went the wrong direction there. So thank you so much for your patience with me, Annie. And look us up on LinkedIn and correct me, please. One last question. It's just this one's from Juliet. Are there CROs that provide support for regulatory? Hold on just a second. I lost it. I thought I had this. Are there? Here we go. Are there CROs that provide support? No, you already asked that one. Oh, okay.
We might have gotten to all of them.
Did we get to all of them? I think we might have. I'm chasing my tail now. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Chris, Natalie, you guys are fantastic. I love that, that no matter what we ask, you have the answer. So thank you so much for the informative presentation, the valuable insights during the Q&A portion. One final reminder, today's recording and presentation slides will be sent in the following days. Thank you so much. You all have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks all.